What if your greatest leadership opportunity isn't waiting for you in a future promotion, but is sitting right in front of you today? In this episode of the Good Leadership Podcast, we're joined by Clay Scroggins, the best-selling author of the powerful and practical book, How to Lead When You're Not in Charge. Clay unpacks what it really means to lead without authority and why waiting for a title could be the very thing holding you back. We're also going to explore how positivity becomes a superpower in toxic workplaces, why a leader's greater asset isn't talent or experience, but energy, and how the best leaders challenge up, think critically without being critical, and take action even when no one is watching. So if you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or unsure about how to lead from where you stand, this episode will give you the mindset, the tools, and the courage to start right now. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Good Leadership Podcast, where we explore the stories, strategies, and insights of thought leaders who inspire us to think differently and lead better. Through candid conversations and expert perspectives, we dive into the challenges, breakthroughs, and practical lessons that shape exceptional leadership. I love how your book states there's really 4 qualities that you need to develop when you're not in charge, that you can develop wherever you are in the organization, so that when you are in charge, it really makes you that much better of a leader. And the first one is positivity. And you call it a leadership superpower, because so many people are overwhelmed, frustrated, or even cynical at work. How can someone shift from that mindset to one of ownership and hope?
I love the question, how do you actually make the shift, right? Because everybody knows there is a time in your life everybody can think about. I'd encourage everybody to do it right now. Just think about that time in your life where you needed somebody to be a voice for good. I mean, I can think about, for me, starting grad school, the school I was a part of, if you were a single adult, you had to live on campus. And gosh, I didn't want to do that. I was 24. I'd already graduated from college. I'd already done dorm life. And I have a dad who's just been a real positive influence in my life. And I was walked right into this dorm room. It felt like a prison cell. Dallas, Texas during the summer is obviously really hot, but in the winter it can get brutally cold. And this particular day in January was a just miserably cold, gray day. But my dad was over my shoulder. And before I could even get any words out, he's going, "This is gonna be perfect. This is all you need. This is gonna be great. This is gonna be perfect for this season of life. I'm so glad this isn't forever, but this is exactly where you're supposed to be right now." And I remember looking back on that, or I look back on it now. I remember thinking, man, that was such a huge moment for me. I needed that voice in my life. And every leader does too, right? It's that time when you lose a client. It's the time when, hey, the prices have gone up, costs are going up, and we're concerned about how we're going to do this, or one of our facilities shuts down, or during COVID, it was the person that was able to be in touch with reality, but also speak with hope and optimism, that really was able to gain influence in that moment. So we've all seen it before, but the question is, can I become that kind of leader? Can I become the kind of leader that is able to not get bogged down with the negativity that is insipid, really? I mean, it gets inside of you. It's everywhere. And it's what our world I mean, if the world, I know Duncan would say the world runs on Duncan, but I would say the world runs on negativity, right? I mean, the news cycle definitely does. And so learning how to, in the face of challenge and discouragement, I think Winston Churchill said, success in life is learning how to bounce from failure to failure with optimism and hope. So learning how to do that, right? That's the person that's going to gain influence, is the person that's able to do that.
And like you said, it starts also with seeing the bigger picture, what you call panoptic views, right? So when you understand how your work connects to that greater mission, it creates meaning, and that fuels positivity, which expands your influence and lifts the whole team.
Yeah, that's the part that people don't realize, is how much your mood affects other people, right? I think of it this way, Charles. When somebody calls you, my phone's back here, but when somebody calls you, which maybe this has happened for some of you since you've been listening to this podcast today, where you see their name pop up. To me, it's the name test on your phone. You see their name, and oftentimes, if it's somebody that's bringing a lot of negativity into your world, you think, "Not today, Satan. Like, I can't deal with you. I don't have time for you. I don't have energy for you." But if sometimes it's the person that you go, "Oh, this is the voice I need right now. I need to talk to this person because of who this person is, and this person's a voice for good, a voice for a can-do, forward-thinking, hope-filled person in my life." But let's turn it around. Adele sings about turning the tables. Let's turn the tables around. I want you to think about, how do people around you feel when you call, right? How does your boss feel when she sees your name pop up? How does she feel about you? A lot of people think we're victims to that, but the truth is you have a greater opportunity to influence the way he or she feels about you than you ever think that you could have. And you got to decide, do I want to be a wind in their sail, or do I want to be a wind against their sail? And I promise you, the people around you, what they want out of you, more important than your ideas or your experience or your education, they want energy. And you don't have to be an extrovert to have energy. You can be an introvert and be a 100-watt bulb, right? It's not about enthusiasm. It's about being that forward-thinking, hope-filled voice for good. To me, it is the game changer for a person at work, is learning how to have that kind of hope and optimism, particularly in the face of challenge.
And as you state, a leader's energy is their most valuable asset because energy is contagious. A leader who brings that hope, right, and belief every day creates a culture where people can thrive.
In the sports world, Charles, I don't know, who do you have a team that you cheer for?
I enjoy, in terms of the NFL, it'd be the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Okay. So let's take,
I know
the
you're probably a
Steelers.
Cowboy fan, so I don't want to offend you, but
No, I do like the Cowboys. I've done a good bit of work with their organization. They are remarkable people. But let me take from the college standpoint. I'm not an Ohio State Buckeye fan, but I like this example because as we're recording this, the previous football season, they're currently the reigning national champions. But their season, I mean, it got knocked off the tracks because they lost to their rival, right, Michigan, at the end of the year. And people were not just saying, "Oh, I wonder if Ryan Day is going to get fired." I mean, the conversation was, is their coach going to get fired now or at the end of the season? Which one? I mean, those were just the two options. And I guarantee you, somebody in that locker room was the voice for good. Somebody in that locker room was the one that said, no, it is not over. There is still hope. We can do it. Let's keep working. Let's keep grinding. And I know that's sometimes sports illustrations don't work in a work context, but I was with a client last week. They had just lost a couple of their biggest customers. And the feeling on the team was real. You could sense the discouragement, but there's got to be somebody in that moment who's willing to go, all right, we're not going to ignore the reality. We're not going to become a rainbow puking unicorn and just everything's awesome all the time. No, we're going to pay attention to, all right, we lost a couple of clients. Let's figure out why. But let's also bring a sense of hope and optimism and a sense of energy, because that really is what's going to make the biggest difference on the people around us. And it's going to make the biggest difference on our chances of, in Ohio State's situation, can we really bounce back from this and experience some of our greatest successes even after the defeat? And those are some of the best stories, right? The comeback stories, when people were down and out and then they came back. So I do think it has the greatest potential. It makes such a big difference in the people around us, but it's a choice. I like the concept of choosing positivity, because you really do have to choose it. There are plenty of days where you don't feel like it, and you got to choose it anyway.
Well, let's talk now about critical thinking. And I love this distinction you make, because I haven't heard this distinction before in any of the books or the people that I've interviewed. Let's talk about thinking critically without being critical. And that's a fine line for leaders to take. What's the difference, and how can we stay on the right side of it?
I talk about this content a lot from a stage in front of an audience. So if I'm in front of an organization, I love asking the crowd that question. Hey, what do you say is the difference between someone who is thinking critically and someone who has just become super critical? And it's amazing how unanimous it is. I mean, here's some of the most common answers, Charles, you could probably guess, right? I mean, number one, somebody usually throws out solution oriented, right? As opposed to just pointing out problems. For sure. Critical thinkers are not just tearing things down, but they're thinking, how can we build this thing up? If you walk into your boss's office and just point out problems, which it gives you a power trip to do that. It makes you feel powerful when you sit in a meeting and you go, oh yeah, but what about, right? I mean, you're like, oh, I slowed the whole meeting down just because I strung some words together. Issue identification alone does not do any good. In fact, from the boss's standpoint, it feels like somebody walks into your office, takes your trash can and dumps it on your desk and then leaves. That's the way it feels. Whereas I would say when you have someone on your team who is bringing solutions, man, that's the kind of person that you want to keep around, particularly when they're engaged with their mind, when they're thinking critically even when they're not at work, right? I'm sure you've had this situation where somebody comes in from the weekend and goes, Charles, I've been thinking about our biggest problem and I had a couple thoughts this weekend. Can I share them with you? I mean, that's stunning. You're like, what in the world? Are you kidding me? Like, you've been thinking about this in your off time? Like, that is remarkable. So that difference, yes, it is about solutions, but I think it's deeper than that. I think the real difference is intent. I think it's critical thinkers want good, and people that are critical, they just don't. That's been informative for me because it's helped me think, okay, do I really care about this person? Because if I care about this person, I'm going to say it in a better way. I'm going to say it in a more positive, forward thinking way. But if I don't really like this person and I'm pointing something out, it's going to come across as pretty negative. I like the little term LBNT. This is one of my favorite ways of giving feedback. LB, like best, NT, next time. Here's what I like best. Here's what I'd love to see next time. It's a way to take your critical thinking and to douse it with some positivity, right? Because when you say, here's what I like best, everybody wants to hear what you like best about what they did. Try it next time somebody's installing a dishwasher at your house or, doing some, putting up a fence for you or something. Tell them, hey, here's what I like best about what you did. And here's what I'd love to see next time. Because it even that has a sense of optimism. Oh, you're telling me there's going to be a next one? That's exciting. I didn't know that I did that well. So I love those 4 letters, LBNT. That's a real helpful way of executing this from a practical sense.
You also encourage leaders to create space to think, because so many leaders these days are in execute mode all the time, scheduling out their day, meeting after meeting after meeting. But you need to schedule time to think and reflect. What impact did that shift have for you and your leadership?
The job that I was in, I would stack my meetings. My last role, 2021, when I resigned from my job, I probably had about maybe 80 or 90 people on the team that I was managing. So, probably 8, 6, 7, 8 direct reports. And it was a pretty large, on a Sunday, there might have been, 9,000 people or so that attended this church that I was leading. So I would meet, starting Monday at 9 a.m. or maybe even a breakfast at 7:30 or 7. And then it would just be meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting until Thursday at 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or whenever the week, our work week was Sunday to Thursday. So I just realized if I live my life that way, I don't have time to decompress from the previous meeting. I don't have time to get ready for the next meeting. So to me, that is it's a Achilles heel of great leaders is stacking meetings, because we feel like we're being efficient when we do that. But a simple way I learned to avoid that was just trying to create a little bit of gap. Well, I would say number one was getting to work earlier. I had to get to work early enough to where I could get everything on my head out, park it on a piece of paper or park it in a folder somewhere, and then get prepared for what I had coming up that day. And then secondly, not stacking meetings, but giving a little bit of time for the meetings to breathe. It's a little bit like, when you're cooking, one of the worst things you can do in your pan is to overcrowd the pan. And I would say most leaders have an overcrowded calendar and they're whipped around by their calendar. But getting on top of your calendar instead of letting your calendar get on top of you, it's essential to allowing yourself to breathe and have a little bit of critical thinking.
You're right. And it changed everything for me because I realized I was spending all my day reacting. And once I started protecting my time to think, I became more creative, more strategic, a better decision maker, and really realized that you can't lead well if you don't make time to think well.
Charles, I saw every now and then I'll get done with a talk on this topic and somebody will say, where's the research? Where is this just your own thoughts? And I jokingly say, well, when I ask the crowd, where do your best ideas hit you? I actually got that from Family Feud, which is true. I saw Steve Harvey ask this question, and that's not the most reliable research, but he did survey 100 people and ask them, when do your best ideas hit you? And you know what the number one answer is?
Shower?
The shower, number one answer. The rest of the list, people naturally get this as well. It's driving in the car, laying in bed at night. Either I woke up in the middle of the night or I'm trying to fall asleep, and then doing some kind of exercise or movement or yard work, something where my physical faculties are taken up doing something that I know how to do that I don't have to think about. My brain almost elevates, transcends, and starts to really think. The reason what all those environments have in common, the shower, driving, yard work, going on a run, whatever it may be, is you're usually not staring at a screen. If you wake up in the middle of the night and you're staring at your screen, you're not alone. But all the data tells us go put your phone to bed. Your phone needs to sleep in a separate room. If you are driving and you're staring at your phone, as a society, we would love to ask you to stop doing that. And if you're showering with your phone, you have a problem and you probably need to see a therapist, right? Because that's a real issue. But I say all that to say, if that's when your best ideas hit you, isn't it possible to be able to schedule time, to prioritize time in your calendar where you're thinking? And I believe deeply it's got to be technology free. You got to have technology free time where it's just you and an open notebook. The other thing I would encourage leaders is, if you're over the age of 30, this is essential for you. When you're in your 20s, your first couple jobs in your career, the problems that you're facing are intuitive. Your training has gotten you ready for this. But when you're in your second, third, fourth job, when you're getting at that point in your career where the problems are more complex, these are not problems that are easy to solve. These are problems that are going to take some critical thinking, that you're going to have to really put some dedicated time in to think about, how do I solve some of our greatest problems that we're facing? And it is possible, but you're exactly right. It's going to take you prioritizing some time to do it, technology-free time to do it.
Well, let's touch on rejecting passivity. So you have a great approach to the CPR method, but what are the signs that someone has fallen into passivity? And then talk about this practical way to break out of it.
I think I read this quote from Pat Lencioni in it was not Five Dysfunction of a Team. It was maybe The Advantage, where he wrote, if you give people the opportunity to weigh in, they're more likely to buy in, right? Which, that's true. The problem is, most people listening to this today are working in an organization big enough where you're having to buy into decisions you didn't get to weigh in on, right? You're having to execute a decision that somebody else made. And oftentimes you think it's a stupid idea or a stupid decision. You're like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever. Why did they make us install this new software? Or why did they update the software? Or why did they choose this sales process? Or why did they launch this new product? Who had this idea? This makes no sense, right? I was standing in front of a group of realtors. Maybe it was a big Keller Williams agency. And I asked them, I said, what percentage of your day is taken up by decisions you didn't get to make, but you have to execute? And the answer kind of startled me, because I was a little surprised. They said almost none. We make most of the decisions. And then it hit me, oh, well, because they're individual business owners, right? If they want to cancel their open house later on Saturday and go play golf, they can do it. If they want to say no to this client and I don't want to take you on, or I don't want to sell that house, they can do that. So most people, though, don't have that sense of agency. Most people are being handed decisions that they didn't get to make. And I say all that to say that creates passivity, because when you're constantly receiving, and then you go, yeah, I even tried to raise my hand and say, what was this? And they didn't even listen, or I gave them feedback before and they still did it anyway. Or I don't even have the CEO's number. I can't just walk down the hall and give her my opinion. All of that creates passivity. It's the reason why business owners really feel that steering wheel works more than people that just work in an organization. And so you just got to be aware of that. You got to be aware that passivity wants to get in you when you're not in charge. And then you got to pay attention to what to do to avoid it. Or in the case of how to leave you're not in charge, to reject it, right? Because it will get in you.
Right. And that CPR method helps really choose something others are ignoring, plan your approach, and respond to what your leader values. Because action normally is that antidote to passivity.
I like the question. On top of that, I would also add the magic wand question. If you could wave a magic wand and this were just different, it were changed, fixed, the problem went away, it just wasn't, what would that be? I was doing this talk with the University of Texas, their dental school. It was their faculty. And I get done with the talk, and the guy sit down. A guy goes, I love that you talked about passivity, because he said that magic wand question, I know the answer. And it's so frustrating because our faculty, our administration is so passive. And I was like, what is the answer to your magic wand question? He said, we need an intern program. Or we need a mentor program. He said, I've worked here for 30 years and I didn't know how to do this job. I had to figure it out. I stepped in a bunch of potholes. I made a mess out of things and nobody taught me how to do it. But now I've been doing it for 30 years and I've been telling them we need a mentor program and they just won't do it. I don't know why they won't, but they're just being passive about it. Now, I have been around long enough where I realize whenever somebody's blaming others, blame is the best way we smuggle our passivity into the future. So I immediately was kind of triggered going, okay, I think you're actually the one being passive. And so I love asking audiences, hey, what could he go and do? He doesn't need the administration to do this. What could he go and do? And a lot of times people will say, oh, he could go start a mentor program. No, 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 no. It's not even that complicated. What could he do? He could actually just go mentor someone, right? You don't need a mentor program to just next person that starts at your office, walk down the hall, say, hey, I've been here 30 years. I've stepped in some potholes. I'd love to buy you lunch. We'll go to Chipotle. We'll splurge on the guac. It'll get crazy. But do you mind if I buy you lunch and tell you a little bit about some of the things that I've learned since working here? They're going to say, sure, I would love that, right? And next thing you know, somebody down the hall hears that you're doing it and they go, well, how did you learn to do that? I just decided it needs to be done. And I was tired of waiting and I thought, let's do it. So Jesus said, where two or more are gathered, there you have a mentor program, right? No, that is not what he said. But that is the way things happen. That's the way things start, is when a couple people go, that's a problem. That's an issue. Somebody should do something about that. I'm not going to wait anymore. I'm just going to go do something. That is the way to fight passivity, is to say, all right, I'm not going to become passive. I'm going to figure out what's the magic wand that if I just wish it were different. And then maybe that will create some accountability to go, maybe I should go do something about that.
Well, as our time is ending, I want to ask you two more questions. One is about, let's dig into one of the trickiest dynamics with any leader, and that's challenging up. And I love the story you give about Chick-fil-A, how the Chick-fil-A milkshake came into existence, how one leader innovated without authority. So perhaps you can unpack that story for us and show us how that demonstrates really that process of challenging up and what Shane Todd did to really push his agenda and get it on the Chick-fil-A menu.
I was searching for an illustration because I knew I wanted to talk about this topic, but I wanted to give people some handles for it. And when I heard about what Shane Todd had done, I didn't know Shane before this, but I called him and got him to tell me the whole story. And then I also called a gentleman, Woody Falk, who at the time was the VP of menu strategy for them. So he would have been the one at their corporate offices that would have said, no, you can't do that. What Shane said was, he said, hey, people were coming in the store and we offered ice cream, but they would ask like, hey, why don't you have a milkshake? And he said over and over and over and over and over again for years, people would ask that. And he said, I had asked questions of our menu strategy team and they just had tried different things. It wasn't working. And he said, I just thought, well, enough's enough. We're just going to do it. And so this is maybe 10 years ago. So we had social media then, but it's certainly much more prevalent now than it was then. But he said, I just put those little signs out in front of our store, those little yard signs, and said, now selling milkshakes, $2.99, chocolate and vanilla. And he said it was so helpful for our team to be able to figure out how to do this. And he was real quick to say, now the milkshake we're selling now is so much better than the one we were selling then. But it built a sense of activity. It built a sense of intention and action with our team. And it helped challenge our corporate. He said, I was not trying to challenge them. I was really just trying to serve the customer. He was so smart because he knew they had a theme at that time called second mile service, that if one person asks you to go 1 mile, you should, the best thing you could do is say, hey, I'll even go the second mile with you. So he said, Dan Cathy, our then president, was so adamant about second mile service. He said, all we were doing was serving the customer in a greater way by mixing up their ice cream into a milkshake. I thought that was brilliant, the way he challenged. He didn't make his boss feel challenged. He's made his boss feel like, I'm offering a solution to the thing you care about most. And that was a brilliant way to do that. So there's this great story that he told me at the very end where one of their executives dropped by his store unannounced. And what they wanted to see is, are these milkshakes clogging up the drive-through? Because drive-through time is such a huge metric for them. And he said, I said, well, let's do a challenge. You do 2 Diet Cokes and I'll do a milkshake. And then he leans over and he goes, Diet Cokes have a lot of fizz and it takes longer to fill those up, which I was like, this guy's hilarious that he was thinking that far ahead about it. But he said it was like a Western duel that he back to back, they went and did their thing. And then they, figured out who could do it fastest. And he said, we ended up doing it about the same amount of time. And he said that was a moment where he was able to prove, hey, we could do this. Now, they ended up rolling them internal. They ran them through their innovation process, and they eventually released the milkshake to all their stores, which it was a couple of years ago. It got named by their customers as their #1 most favorite menu item, which is pretty spectacular for a company that's built itself on chicken sandwiches. So yeah, that story to me was such a great example of how to challenge in a way that doesn't feel threatening, in a way where you're communicating well, and in a way that you're doing it in accordance with the values of the company. I thought that was a really spectacular example of that.
Yeah, it's such a great story because he aligned his idea with what the company valued, serving customers well. He respected the process, built trust, made it easy for others to say yes. And that's such a great model of how you challenge well. Now, at the end of the book, you have this phrase that I want to get to before we end today, and that's as now, so then. Why is that such an important mindset for developing leaders?
When I was 21, I interned at the state capitol. I went to college in Atlanta, and the school I went to was right around the corner from the state capitol. They had this intern program. So I went through the intern program. I thought at that time in my life, I wanted to study political science or public policy. And the desk that I sat in was in the governor's office in the policy group. And I sat right outside of the conference room where they would have a lot of their big meetings. And there was always, they were always contentious, it felt. There was just always yelling and a lot of fighting. And this one particular day, I remember hearing a lot of loud voices, and then someone goes, like, beat the table. And then, like, in a big booming voice, said, "I am the governor of the state of Georgia. Listen to me." And that was when it hit me, Charles, that I had never read a leadership book. I had never been to a leadership conference. But I remember as a 21-year-old hearing that going, that's not it. If you have to wave your weapon of authority around, to me, it shows me that you missed a class somewhere, that you skipped a step. You failed to learn how to cultivate influence, and then you got in charge. And the only thing you knew to do was to leverage power, was to leverage authority. And so the reason why I like that phrase, as now, so then, is because it really brings the emphasis to what you're doing right now. The situation you're in, the seat you're in right now is so important, because if you can learn how to cultivate influence from the seat you're in right now, when you get to be in charge, you will have influence. You will understand how to cultivate influence and how to leverage influence. And those are the best kinds of leaders. The best kinds of leaders are not the ones that have to say, if you don't get this done, you're fired. No, the best kinds of leaders, even when they're in charge, are the ones who know how to cultivate authority. They know how to cultivate influence, and then they know how to leverage influence to move people to do what they might not want to do to accomplish what it is they want to accomplish. And so if you can do it when you're not in charge, you'll be that much better of a leader when you are in charge.
Wonderful. Well, for everyone, if you've been waiting for your permission to lead, consider this your green light. As Clay reminded us today, great leaders don't wait for authority. They cultivate influence, they lead themselves well, and they step up when it matters most. So whether you have a title or not, your ability to lead begins right now. Thank you so much, Clay, for joining me today. Remind our listeners how they can get in contact with you and learn more about your work.
Yeah, thanks, Charles, again, for taking your limelight and shedding a little bit of it on me. My email address is just clay.scroggins@gmail.com. Anybody listening, if you want to reach out with a question or even a comment, or what I love doing more than anything is speaking to organizations, trying to help them develop and invest in their leaders. It's the hallmark of great organizations is they are making investments in their people. And so to partner with organizations to do that is such a delight for me. So if I can do that, would love to do that. I'm on LinkedIn. Connect with me. Would love to stay connected to any of you. But again, can't thank you enough for letting me be a part of this podcast today.
Thank you, Clay, and thank all of you for listening. If this conversation has sparked something in you, share it with a colleague. Leave a review or visit Clay's book, How to Lead When You're Not in Charge. It's packed with practical tools to help you rise from wherever you stand. And until next time, remember, lead with influence, not just authority. I hope this episode has provided you with valuable insights. If it has, I ask you to share it with someone who would also benefit from it. If you've been enjoying and gaining knowledge from this podcast, then subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you can find all the previous episodes of the podcast and additional learning resources. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Spotify and leave up to a 5-star review.